I woke up to a message from a flight instructor asking me if I've considered the damage that I've caused businesses within the paramotoring community. I couldn't believe someone would ask another person a question like this. Like, have you ever experienced a time when you're doing well and then something happens? Maybe you get a call from the school because your kid got in a fight, or it's that moment when you find out that someone's betrayed you. And then in that moment, you're instantly pissed. I was pissed. In what world would someone be in a crash that came super close to killing them? And then they're in the ICU, and then after that, they're stuck in a wheelchair for 2 months with this intense pain. That'll never go away. As you sit there in this new immobile reality, isn't it safe to assume that you'd have considered just about every aspect of this, not just the crash, but the impact that it's had on paramotoring companies? You know that, and without a doubt, he knew that. So why? It's obvious that he believes that my crash screwed him over and that he was going to lose money as a result of it. I know the guy. We've had plenty of conversations. I'd firmly positioned myself on a side that stood for smaller class sizes. He argued that having the biggest class size possible was in the best interest of students, and he was prepared to die on that hill. He made it very clear that he's a businessman and that money is his North Star. This could not be further from what I believe. 3 years ago, a combat wounded veteran pulled up to the field that I was flying from as I was coming in for a landing after this incredible flight. He got out of his car with a Purple Heart emblem on his license plate. We started talking, and he told me how he'd seen all of my videos and insisted that I be the one to teach him how to fly. I just started my flight school because of my deep love for flying and the joy that I feel when sharing that freedom for others.
Everything's looking good.
And the joy that I feel when sharing that freedom with others. He was ready to pay me right then and there. But having been in combat myself, treating countless wounded soldiers as they lay bleeding, longing to go home, and losing 3 men in my own platoon, I immediately recognized the significance of the Purple Heart that he carried. I knew that he'd been through hell and that flying had the potential to transform his life. There was no way that I was going to take his money. Seeing him experience flight meant far more to me than any financial gain.
Chest forward, chest forward, chest forward, yeah!
Although my motivation for teaching people to fly is on the opposite end of the spectrum as the person who'd sent me that message, I do understand that for many people out there, their paramotor business, be it flight training or manufacturing, it's their source of income. It's their livelihood. That said, there's no company that I feel worse for than BGD, the British paraglider company whose paraglider I was flying when I crashed. For clarity, I'll tell you how it happened. A fantastic human being who owns Fly Products USA asked me one morning if I'd like to try out a new glider that was so new that no one, aside from the test pilots, had ever flown. And as you can imagine, I was so excited that he was going to make this possible for me. So of course, I said yes and thank you. He insisted that I did not need to make a video, but told me that it was fine if I did. And when it arrived in the mail, I pulled it out of the box and headed straight to the field. I had planned out this funny video while I waited for it to arrive. And the plan was I was going to fly to this hardware store on the edge of town, pretending as if this was some sort of normal way to get places. And while flying, I would share my thoughts on this brand new wing and then land at the store, grab the part that I needed for my toilet, and fly home. To really up the irony of this, it's totally normal to do everyday shit with a paramotor theme, I recruited the help of one of my really good friends who I also taught how to fly. He was going to land at the hardware store in his medical scrubs just as I was leaving. And as I passed him, we'd briefly say hi to each other, and then he would explain that he was at the hospital when one of the medical devices went down and that he needed to just quickly fly to the hardware store as well and pick up a part for this medical device and then fly back to the hospital. It was freaking hilarious. But when I got home, I put the memory cards into the computer and then panic set in. Both of the cards had failed. Once again, this is one of those moments when a great day gets totally flipped upside down. After that, the winds were really strong for the next few days, and so I eventually decided that once the conditions were ideal to fly again, I'd simply just fly the glider and share my thoughts. It was also an opportunity for me to test out my new camera mount, which, by the way, holds up really well to high impacts. Ask me how I know. As you can see in the video, I did a very thorough pre-flight. I took off, rechecked my lines, as you can also see in the video, and then banked out to the right and headed out to the open desert. This glider, the BGD Luna 3, was advertised as a fast glider. It was a big selling point for this glider, so of course I wanted to know how fast it was. Spoiler alert, it goes 48 miles an hour! What I didn't see was a tension knot that somehow ended up in the most challenging place to visually inspect once the glider inflates and is overhead. To see it, you have to tilt your head way back to the point where you can see the central lines that go to the trailing edge of the glider. But what makes it challenging is that when you tilt your head back, your helmet hits the upper spars of the Paramotor's hoop section. A valuable lesson was discovered. No matter how challenging it may be to see those central trailing edge lines, find a way to check them anyways. If you don't fly, I'll clarify. To get the glider to its maximum speed, it's really simple. All you need to do is release the trims and push out on the speed bar. But because it had a knot in one of the lines, the glider collapsed in a very rapid way. If you want to see the crash, I'll put the link in the description. The mistake was entirely my own. And while I could have avoided it, I read countless testimonies of pilots that reported that they have never checked the rear central lines, and understandably so. It was very common for instructors to teach students to look left and to look right. Furthermore, it's always been common for instructors to teach students not to look directly up during takeoff because it can throw off your equilibrium. If you watch other YouTubers' videos from before my crash, you'll often see them look left and right before takeoff. Checks may have evolved somewhat since my crash. In fact, many people have dubbed checking the rear central lines the Vela check, which sounds kind of Russian. So I was smashed into the ground. I'd broken so many body parts. The paramedics loaded me up and drove me away from the scene of the crash, and my wife was distraught and phoned my friend to pick up my crumpled paramotor and the glider. And when he dropped it off at our house, he removed the cameras, and once he'd gotten back to his house, uploaded the footage.
This one's still recording. Bad boy, Anthony. Bad boy. My footage now. He's a bad boy. Yes, he's a bad boy.
And while I was arriving at the hospital, he was beginning to share images and clips of my crash with people in the flying community who he felt could try and piece together what had happened. As people were examining how this whole thing unfolded, I still had no clue at all as to what happened. I told my wife that I didn't know. It just collapsed. And I told her that if there was something wrong, it should be on the footage. It was in that moment that my wife told me that this footage should not be released until we know what happened, and I totally agreed. Eventually though, the footage found its way to the manufacturer of this specific glider, and they spotted a deformation in the belly side of the glider. They wanted the footage shared and politely requested that I make a statement that this was not the glider's fault, and then asked that I make it known that this was pilot error. It was true. It was absolutely my fault. Even if me missing the knot is totally understandable, it's still my fault. At the same time though, people throughout the paramotoring community were also asking for the footage. So per the request of the manufacturer and the paramotor community, I shared the video. And right at the start of the video, I say,
the BGD Luna 3 is not responsible for this crash. I have no blame for this exceptional paraglider. The only thing I can recommend is that you make sure you not only double but triple check to make sure that your glider is in the correct configuration so that something like this isn't the result of your flying experience.
To the flight instructor who clearly wanted to hurt me with his question, yes, I am aware. I'm aware that my crash caused people to reconsider if flying fits into their own risk acceptance. In doing so, it very well could have caused someone to cancel their flight training or cancel their order of a new glider or paramotor. Above all, I am really sorry that BGD's new glider, after all the research and development that they put into creating it, I have to say that glider was not only a safe glider, but a fantastic glider on top of that. Aside from an apology, which I've already given to them personally, I don't owe them anything. And truth be told, they want nothing to do with me at this point. And that hurts because I had spent a long time pining for their love. In my heart, I'm still a kid who sees the companies of these flying creations with googly eyes. I love what they do, but I won't lie to you and say that their products suck. It's just the opposite, really. They are a great company that makes a great product. And to this day, my favorite glider for beginners is the BGD Magic. But to be fair, I never flew Ozone's newest glider, so perhaps it's just as good, maybe even better. Perhaps I will know soon enough. To the other businesses in the paramotoring industry, I am sorry for the impact that my crash may have had on your livelihood. I love paramotoring and the people who fly them. I've always worked really hard to inspire people to fly through my videos and my podcast. To this day, I want those who'd want to fly to sign up for training with an instructor who can dedicate their attention to them and teach them all of the ways that they can pursue their dream in the safest way possible. Paramotoring is as safe as you make it. I've said time and time again, if you make good choices, you have every reason to believe that you'll have countless incredible flights under your belt and live long enough to die of natural causes at a ripe old age with your loving wife and children by your side. I've considered the damage that I've temporarily caused, if of course, damage refers to how much money you'll line your pockets with. But the only choice that I have now is to move forward by continuing to inspire people to fly in the safest way with new insight from the lessons that I've learned. I'm not perfect. I still have so much more to learn. I can't wait for you to join me in this next chapter, my first flight back. It'll be a huge step, not just for me, but for anyone facing their own challenges who's ready to rise again.